This is Sean Thomas Radcliff. Welcome to another episode of Preservation Oaks. In this series, we introduce you to professionals from museums, cultural, genealogical, and historical societies across the United States. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the program. Good day, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We have another exciting program lined up for you today. In this episode, we're thrilled to welcome Mr. Kevin Hardman, President, Mr. Zach Hewett, Vice President, and Mr. Jon Clark, Board Member of Utah's Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna. This incredible museum is brimming with fascinating artifacts from the peak of the mining industry, offering a unique glimpse into Magna's rich history. It's the perfect destination for anyone eager to explore how mining shaped the local economy and culture. But that's just the beginning. The museum also provides an engaging and educational experience, bringing to life the diverse cultures, customs, and history of the ethnic groups that built the area. After a car accident damaged the building over a year ago, the museum had to close for major renovations. Now, following their grand reopening in April of 2024, it's the ideal time to feature this fantastic place on our show. By the end of this episode, you'll be inspired to join their mission to preserve the history of the hardworking people who settled in the communities built around the railroad and mining industries of the West. I'm Sean Thomas Radcliff, coming to you from Salt Lake City. And this is Preservation Oaks, the original talk program on MicroStream Radio. We spotlight museums, cultural and heritage institutions, associations, historical and genealogical societies, and history-focused media creators from across the United States. Our main platform is preservationoaks.podbean.com, but you can find us on nearly all podcast platforms as well as Rumble, Getter, Minds, TikTok, Facebook, Odyssey, and YouTube. Wherever you listen, we appreciate it when you like, comment, follow, or subscribe. If you're interested in being a guest on our program or have questions or comments, please email us at preservationoaks@gmail.com. A big shout out to all our amazing supporters. Your efforts in spreading the word about our program are invaluable. Thanks to you, more people are discovering the incredible heroes behind Preservation Oaks. Those dedicated to preserving our shared history. You rock. Unlike many podcasts, we don't ask for financial support from our listeners. Our passion drives us to highlight the fantastic work of the organizations that make up Preservation Oaks. These dedicated individuals and groups are true heroes, tirelessly working to safeguard our heritage. Our Preservation Oak organizations and their volunteers are the guardians of our nation's stories, ensuring that our past is not forgotten. And here's the best part. You can be a part of this heroism by sharing our program and helping us grow. You're actively contributing to the preservation of our history. So let's keep pushing forward. Tell your friends. Support your local museums or historical societies, and together we'll preserve our rich cultural tapestry for future generations. Thank you for being an essential part of this journey. Get ready for the next episode of Preservation Oaks. We'll be chatting with Michelle Zeman from the Alden Depot and the Helena Township Historical Society, located on the shore of Torch Lake in the charming village of Alden. Their museum is a treasure trove of local history. The current Alden Depot, built in 1907, was once known as the finest depot on the line north of Grand Rapids. The Pierre Marquette Train Depot was a hub of activity in historic Alden, Michigan. The daily resort special train brought passengers from across the Midwest to enjoy the many summer camps, resorts, and hotels. Alden was a favorite destination, selling more tickets than any other stop along the line. And we get to learn all about the area and the Alden Depot and Helena Township Historical Society. How cool is that? I've been looking forward to this episode because this depot is absolutely beautiful, well preserved and maintained, and the commitment of the community to their history is inspiring. It's going to be a great episode. All right, that being said, let's get this show snapping. Here's a short bio of our guests. Kevin Hardman is the president of Utah's Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna and a dedicated volunteer. A sixth-generation Magna resident, Kevin's family has called this town home since 1854. He met his wife Stephanie during a backpacking trip in the Uinta Mountains in 1979, and together they've explored Utah's breathtaking landscapes for 45 years. They have a close-knit family of 4 married sons, 15 grandchildren, and a great-granddaughter, all of whom share a love for the outdoors. Kevin, now retired after a 40-year career as an electrician, enjoys rock hounding, hunting, painting, and devoting his time to the museum. Zach Hewett, Vice President of Utah's Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna since 2023, has a passion for uncovering how things work and using creative methods to achieve his goals. With a background in history, Zach has enhanced both his education and practical experience through dedicated volunteer work at the museum. His role involves contributing to board decisions, engaging with the community, and honing his organizational and conversational skills. Zach's involvement with the museum has also expanded his network and provided numerous educational opportunities. During his studies, he completed an internship where he conducted a research project that he continues to develop with aspirations of publication. Jon Clark, a proud board member of Utah's Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna, is a retired audio engineer with a rich background in the PC and video game industry. With substantial experience as a technical production manager at 2 of America's leading community theaters, Jon has honed his experience in live performance. His innovative approaches in the software business set his company apart, earning numerous awards for computer graphics in games. Currently, Jon continues to work in live production as a scenic, lighting, and sound designer and shares his knowledge as a teacher. He's a great resource for Utah's Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna. All right. Welcome to the program, Kevin, Zach, and Jon.
Well, thank you.
Hey.
Great to be here.
Hey, in the introduction, I let listeners know that a year ago there was some kind of an auto accident at the museum which led to you having to close and reconstruct the museum somewhat. Reconstruction took a year or more, and thankfully you were able to reopen in April 2024. Can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, this is Kevin. So on January 1st, 2023, at approximately 3 a.m., I received a phone call from the local police, and they asked me if I was Kevin Hardman and part of the museum. And I said, yes, I am. And they said, well, there's been an accident down here at the museum. So I hurried down there not knowing exactly what to expect. And we found that there was a person who had been to a party and had driven down the road directly into the front of the museum, hit the museum with a full-size Ford truck and caused some severe damage. Luckily, he hit a steel pillar that was there inside the museum that had actually been put there a few years prior when we had a 5.7 earthquake back in 2020. We were fortunate that no one was hurt in the vehicle, but it was a major repair job that we had to do. $80,000 to repair the museum.
Oh, wow.
And 14 months of being closed.
Oh, wow.
The structural damage included the brick, the windows. It hit so hard that we had to replace footings. And that was only the outside of the building. The inside damage was just devastating. When I got down there that night, opened the door and got in, I was just sick. It had hit two bearing walls and tipped over several of our displays. One of our most prominent displays in there is Shorty's Shoe Shop, and it had hit that, and there was glass everywhere, and stuff had been broke, had been welded back together since, but it was really devastating.
That is a nightmare. Did any artifacts get destroyed?
No artifacts were really destroyed. The Shorty Shoe Shop and the Toriani family had donated, had a lot of different kinds of metal parts that actually were broke in parts. But one of our locals there, Tim Draper, that's actually on our board, is a great welder and was able to weld those things back together again. It's interesting that a lot of our wood shelves in there were damaged, and a lot of that wood was as old as the display. So what we did is when we remodeled, we created a little gift shop in the front of the museum, and we used that wood. We actually sent it to a friend that's a carpenter, and he made little shelves and that out of it that we have within our gift shop.
Wow. And you reopened it in April?
We did. We reopened in April, and we have had some great visitors. In fact, we have had 473 guests come to our museum since we opened in April.
That's fantastic. Great support. A lot of great community support. That's excellent. Thank you for sharing that.
We do have some great support out there, Sean.
What's your favorite local restaurant in Magna, and what's the best dish they serve?
I'll tell you, that's an easy one. Favorite restaurant is El Habanero, a little Mexican restaurant. And if you ever go there, you need to do the number 13. It's chili chunga filled with pork and cheese, homemade chips and salsa, and fried ice cream.
Oh, wow. That sounds great.
Which I have to say was my mother's favorite.
Oh, all right. That's nice.
She passed away at 96.
Wow, she lived a good life.
She was 90.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a local family that owns it, and they've had it going for 20 years. When we first went there, my wife and I, the furniture were all mixed matched, and the chairs, and over the years, they've been able to put some improvements into it, but it's still owned by the same family, and it's an amazing place to eat with great food and great atmosphere.
Yep. Truly a Western town kind of restaurant. That's great. How did each of you first get involved in the Utah Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna? Why don't we start with Kevin?
Well, about 6 years ago, and I'd heard about the museum, many, many years before that. And some of the classmates that I went to school with were working there. And Jon and I actually went to school together. But anyway, our classmates were working there, volunteering there, and serving there in the leadership. And they were constantly asking me to be a part of it. I was an electrician and very involved with my work. And anyway, I retired 5 years ago, actually. And I was asked to come down and volunteer. And I needed a partner. And so I asked one of my friends if he'd like to be my partner. His name's Tim Draper. And we now both serve on the board. Tim's our secretary, and I'm the president serving this year. It's been a great opportunity to be there and be a part of the museum. I love it. It's next to my wife, it's my second great love.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Kevin. Jon?
Well, I'm the newest member of the board and probably the newest volunteer down there. I've been out there once or twice in the past. It's been a few years since I've been there. And I just happened to be in Magna one day and drove past him and saw it was open. So I thought, I haven't been in there for 3 or 4 years. I'll go in and take a look around, and bumped into Kevin, who says we went to school together. It's great. And we got talking, and he showed me around and said, this needs some better lighting in here. What's my reaction to the whole thing? It's like, this is a really, really neat museum, but it just needs something. And He twisted my arm for about 10 seconds and said, well, you interested in being involved? And so my aim is ultimately to try and help them out a little bit with some of the visual appeal of some of the things, background in theater and design, lighting, particularly. And just see what we can do. It turns out my wife is a grant writer, and she's offered to help out a little bit with some grant writing and get some improved funding for the museum, which nobody said no to that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at right now.
You're going to do great things for the
I'm just
museum.
getting started. I've been familiarizing myself. I've been out there a number of times, taken a lot of photographs. I've mapped the place out, and I've drafted up a plan of the facility. I don't know where things are now, and I'm starting to come up with ideas.
Fantastic. You're going to do great things. Wow. The future's bright.
Yeah, he really is, Sean. He's going to do great things. So, Sean, if I can put another little tidbit in there, we have so many people that come to the museum and walk in as visitors, and they love the museum. And if I'm there, I talk to every one of them about being a volunteer at the museum. And wow, we have got some great help because of that invitation to them.
Fantastic. And Zach, how did you first get involved with the museum?
Well, a few years ago, I was walking down Magna Main Street, which I had just recently become a resident of at the time. And I saw a sign on the museum that was mentioning volunteers. And I was going to school to pursue a history major. And I thought it was a great way to get some experience as well as my education at the museum. And when I first came into the museum, I talked to Kevin, as we all do. And I told him why I wanted to be involved and what I wanted to do to help out. And Kevin asked if I wanted to sit in on a board meeting, which I did. And that first board meeting I attended, they made a vote and made me a board member. And after a few months, we had our elections that were held, and I was made the vice president.
Congratulations. That's great.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's been a great privilege.
You've got a wonderful background. You'll do great things at the museum.
Oh, yes. I'm happy to help out where I can and do what I can.
Thank you for that, Zach.
Thank you.
Have any of you ever come across any surprising or unusual items while working at the museum?
This is John. One of the things that really caught my attention in my first visit and the ensuing visits have been kind of those small household items that were produced at the mills and the shops at Kennecott. Frying pans, mailbox, buckets, doorstops, all kinds of strange little things that really have a personal connection.
Very cool.
Kennecott produced every product that they needed to the mine up there. And it was called a sand cast lot. And so what they would do is they would have an engineer make it out of wood first. So the carpenters would make it out of wood, and then they would then produce a cast, and they would mold it in the brass foundry or the steel foundry. So every item was made up there that John's referring to.
Yeah, and I mean, there are giant gears and wheels and all kinds of, like you said, anything they needed. And this is a massive industrial operation. They built it there. But in the different shops, the mailbox, I'm sure, wasn't cast. I don't know, maybe it was.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. Anyway, but there's a mailbox, there's frying pans that they would give to new employees that were made there. I think you said those were made in the boiler shop.
Yes. Pans that John's talking about that were cast out in the boiler shop, but also buckets. And, everybody had a dog dish and bookends and those things. Yeah, door stops.
Yeah. So I'm thinking this is a story in itself, a little display that we really need to make. Because, this is stuff that probably would have ended up as scrap.
Oh, yeah.
Such an insignificant quantity of material that was used, and yet it became incredibly useful and important to the people out there to have those things.
Fantastic.
And Kennecott, just about the time Kevin and I were born, is kind of the end of that golden age at Kennecott, where they really took care of their employees in a big way. There was the town of Garfield, was a company town built and provided for employees, a place to live. Copperton up near the Bingham Mine is another company town that still exists, built by Kennecott for employees to make it possible for them to get to work, to have the things they needed. They didn't really have a company store system, thank goodness. We don't have that legacy. But, you know, they really took care of their employees. They understood the importance of their employees. I say kind of the golden age, even when we were growing up, though, everybody's dad almost worked at Kennecott. And I'm kind of the oddball because my dad was a town dentist. And so I didn't have that connection. But all of my friends, you know, I understood shift work and don't make noise in the house when their dad's working the graveyard shift. Or the whole town moved to the rhythms of that whole milling and smelting operation. But yeah, those small things, those little odd pieces that have turned up in people's homes over the years really caught my attention.
Okay. And the museum has these items or a number of these items on display?
Yes, Sean.
Yeah, there are a number of those things on display. What I'd like to do is kind of consolidate some of those and see if we can acquire a few more, at least on loan, and kind of create a display specifically about it.
That's history, that's for sure.
The items that are sandcast lot that were made up there, as John mentioned, the wheels and gears and everything like that. Kennecott gave us their entire historical display. And so within the museum, on the walls and around the museum, some of these wheels we're talking about are 5 feet tall and a foot wide, made out of wood, that were eventually made out of steel. But in the warehouse, we have thousands of them stacked in boxes. And so we're actually, you know, looking around at some of the other mining museums of Utah and seeing if they would like some of these sandcast lots.
Oh, yeah, that's nice. That's really nice. Boy, that's history. That was nice of the company to do that, you know, give it to the museum. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think that over the years, there's been so many different changes in ownership in the mining industry there that perhaps when Rio Tinto took over, they had so many historical items and no place to put them. They have the visitor center at the pit. They had a small visitor center there in Copperton, but Magna's visitor center was a little larger, and so we got a lot of donations, whether we wanted them or not.
Yeah, very cool. Now, one of the things that listeners are going to be intrigued by, I think, is the town's name, Magna, and how Magna started and that kind of thing. Can you share some captivating stories from your area's past that kind of highlight the town's character?
Historically, you have to kind of understand a little geology or geography, I guess, to appreciate a lot of the way this all happened. If you go back about 50,000 years, you got Lake Bonneville, which was a huge lake that covered most of the state of Utah, eastern Nevada, southern Idaho, covered 93,000 square miles or something like that. It's a big, big lake. And anyway, there was a flood. At some point, the outlet started to collapse up in southern Idaho. And the lake dropped by about 350 feet and then stopped. And we ended up with some beaches. So if you look around the valley, the Salt Lake Valley, you notice that there's a horizontal line that kind of runs around the entire valley. And around here we call those the benches. But those are the ancient beaches from Lake Bonneville, where the sediments would drop out. And then if you go down about 350 feet below that, you get to another bend. And if you go down another couple hundred feet below that, you start getting to the last bench, and then ultimately the lake stopped getting additional water when the end of the last ice age. And so the Great Salt Lake is the remnant of this humongous lake that used to be here. So what we wind up with is the bottom of the Salt Lake Valley is massive amounts of sediment from the mountains surrounding, where eroded over millennia. Magna sits on a clay, really fine clay soil that's over 1,000 feet deep before you get to bedrock. It sits only about 60 or 70 feet above the level of the Great Salt Lake, and we're, 5 or 6 miles away from the shoreline. And then you go up to the bench, to this Lake Bonneville bench, which is at about 4,500 feet. And the interesting thing there is it allowed for the mine to transport material from Bingham at the copper mine, massive amounts of material, to their mills and smelters in Magna without having to climb up any hills or do any massive cuts or fills or anything. Very little. It's just almost a level shot from the mines out to the mills 16 miles away. So those train tracks, back when they moved everything by rail, were easy, relatively easy to place. And then once things got to the mill, it was all downhill to feed everything into the smelter out at Garfield, which is almost right at lake level. So geographically, it makes a lot more sense for Magna to be where it is than you might think. Why is this mill town 15 miles away from the mine? There was enough water there to do things. So that's kind of how Magna ended up where it was. One more thing to say about the kind of the prehistory and geology of the place. There's evidence of human habitation not far from Magna. There's a cave. We all grew up knowing it as Dead Man's Cave, but it was technically, I guess, called Toronto's Cave. Just kind of around the bend from Magna, kind of just a little bit to the north and west. And there's evidence in there that was carbon dated at 9,500 years ago.
Oh.
Human remains. So this is an area that's been inhabited for thousands of years. The Goshutes, the Utes, the Paiute Indians all inhabited this place, lived as hunter-gatherers. Interestingly, the white settlers kind of saw them as being these poor people who didn't own anything and were to be taken pity on, when in reality, here's a civilization that has survived in this desert environment for thousands of years. Owning things was just a detriment to them. So they didn't have much in the way of belongings, but they were incredibly successful at surviving in a really hostile landscape.
Yeah, to add just a couple things with the Shoshones, Utes, and the Goshutes were that they had a migratory route. They would come down off the Snake River out of Idaho, and they would stop in the wintertime along the shores of the Great Salt Lake. There they would gather salt, and they would use that salt to preserve their meat. At that particular time, when they would hit those shores of the Great Salt Lake, it was the migration of the birds. And ducks and geese would be in there by the thousands, and they would harvest a lot of that meat and use the salt from the Great Salt Lake to preserve it. And they would end up down in central and southern Utah for the wintertime. They would also hit along the west of Magna, and there's a lot of pinyon out there that produce pine nuts. And pine nuts were one of their big staples that they would need for the wintertime. They would actually, and we still do, we still go out there as families and gather those pine nuts. They're delicious to the taste. What's interesting about the pine nut is that it's in a sticky cone when you pull it off the tree. And so sometimes you have that lasting fragrance on your hands for a couple weeks till it wears off.
Oh, that's cool.
But they're amazing taste. And what they would do is they would lay them around the fire and heat them up, and that would cause the pine nut to come out of the cone. What they would also do is they would travel on down into a little further south of Magna, and they would run into obsidian beds down there. And that obsidian would be made into arrowheads and spear points. As Jon mentioned, their presence is known all over out in this area. We go out camping on the West Desert, all you have to do, if you have a good eye, you look at the ground, and you'll be able to see their chippings where they broke that stone to create the arrowheads that they needed. Jon also mentioned how their presence is known. We have hieroglyphics all over, up in the hills there above Magna, and archaeologists, as of recent, had found a hearth out there that they actually carbon dated, and they found tobacco seeds in it.
Oh my.
And they figure those tobacco seeds are 13,000 years old.
Wow.
Also,
that's a little farther west than us, but yeah.
A little further west,
a long time ago.
Yeah, 30 miles.
Yeah.
Also out there is Lake Bonneville, and they've actually found human footprints in there that date back 13,000 years. There's a lot of great evidence. There's actually a cave, several caves besides Toronto Cave. There's another cave out in the next valley that has a warrior in it painted on the wall. And it's called Red Man Cave. And this warrior is holding a shield in one hand and a spear in the other with a big headdress. So their presence was well documented here in the valley, being the first residents.
Wow, fantastic. And over there by Toronto's cave, that's the same place where the mining company built the smelters that are still there today, if my map app is correct.
Yes, it is. It's still there, and there's a monument. We have some really good preservationists that have an organization here in Utah. It's called the Daughters of the Utah Pioneers, and there's actually a plaque that sits right there on the highway and talks about the history of Toronto's cave.
Nice. I wanted to understand, does the museum have any contacts with any of the Native Americans in the area or the tribes?
That's on my list of things to try and zero in on and get better information and present things in a way that I think that they would be proud of having on display.
That's respectful to their culture, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, let me tell you about one of our exhibits out there. So we start our tour right with the Native Americans as you come into the building. We have an artifact in there that's been carbon dated 10,000 year old. It's a pot. We have two great display cases that talk all about the Native Americans. And we had a teacher that actually lived in Magna. Her name was Emma Elmer. And she taught down in the Four Corners area of Utah to the Native Americans. And they loved her and she loved them. And they knew that she had a great love of archaeology. And so they donated to her these artifacts that they had. And for a long time, they were at Brigham Young University. And then she was able to bring them out of that university and donate them to our Magna Museum. And so we hold that as an extremely beautiful exhibit.
Okay, thank you. Kevin and Zach and Jon, it's time for a break for a few minutes.
Sounds great.
All right, listeners, we'll be right back after this important message about donating to the Utah Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna.
Discover the heart of Magna's history at the Utah Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna. Located at 9056 West Magna Main Street, the museum is a vibrant showcase of the rich cultural and mining heritage that has shaped the community. From fascinating exhibits on local mining history to diverse displays celebrating the many cultures that make Magna unique, there's something for everyone to explore and enjoy. But we need your help to keep this treasure trove of history alive. Your generous donations support the exhibits, educational programs, and community events. Every contribution makes a difference in preserving the stories and heritage of Magna for future generations. It's easy to give. Simply visit them in person at 9056 West Magna Main Street or call them at 801 603E025-698-0226 to learn more about donation opportunities. You can also connect with them on Facebook at Ethnic Mining Museum of Magna to stay updated on the latest events and initiatives.
Join us in celebrating and preserving Magna's rich history. Please donate today and help keep the spirit of our community alive. The Utah Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna, where history comes to life. Visit us, call us, or connect with us on Facebook. Together, we'll make history.
I am General Matto Vandu Maximanus, from the planet you refer to as BD 114672C. I am the legate of the 2nd AB Picturis B region, governor of the approaches to NU Octantis A B, interplanetary consul, commander of the legions of AB Picturis A, 91 Aquari B, Mu Leonis B, and Gamma Librae B, and I listen to Preservation Oaks on Microstream Radio.
Oh my God. I think I've had a bit too much history. I think I've been thrown into an alternate reality. Sort of a parallel universe kind of thing. No, I think it's just that I'm identifying so much with the people of the past. Excellent. This is kinda nice, knowing how things really work and using history to make better decisions for the future. I'm kind of digging this. Wow. I love history. Oh my goodness. Okay now, that's much better. Let's keep on listening.
Wherever you get your podcast groove on, you can get all the history you can eat anytime with Preservation Oaks. Join other listeners at preservationoaks.podbean.com and let us know what you think by sending email to preservationoaks@gmail.com.
Ever since I introduced Jim to Preservation Oaks, he's been begging for a second helping of history.
Hey there, folks. It's your friendly neighborhood history guru. And for a limited time only, tune into Preservation Oaks and snag our recipe of the week for smoked octopus and turnips. It's the secret, old-fashioned method that seals in all the juices. Trust me, even those parts you never thought were edible will surprise you. Just close your eyes if you have to. Yes, sir. Preservation Oaks isn't just your go-to for historical tidbits. We're also your one-stop shop for octopus and turnip. Whether you're whipping up something as fancy and complicated as octopus on the half shell or keeping it down home with good old octopus on a stick, our recipes have got you covered. With us, you can serve up a hearty dose of octopus and history every single night.
Preservation Oaks, because who needs anything else for excitement when you've got history and octopus? There you are, in your doctor's waiting room again. Nothing to do but flip through an old magazine from 2014. But, are you just waiting for your doctor, or is she really your partner in preserving history? Unsung heroes volunteering at the local historical society, gearing up for fundraising extravaganzas. Ever spread the word about the Preservation Oaks podcast to your friends? Elevate your waiting game by listening to Preservation Oaks episodes, making every minute riveting. Tune in at preservationoaks.podbean.com, YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble, or your favorite podcast platform. Unleash the power of history during your wait.
9 out of 10 family historians agree Preservation Oaks is the best podcast on the internet.
And now, back to Preservation Oaks.
All right, welcome back to Preservation Oaks. I'm your host, Sean Thomas Radcliff, and we're here today with Kevin Hardman, Zach Hewett, and Jon Clark from the Utah Ethnic and Mining Museum, located in Magna, Utah. Guys, let's pick up where we left off, and welcome back.
Well, thank you, Sean. As we were talking about the different groups of people that influenced the Magna area, I wanted to talk about the Mormon pioneers, and they were my family. I'm a sixth generation descendant of the pioneers, and they came into the valley. And I'd like to tell you today about one of actually my third great grandmother. She was born in England in 1809, and her name was Margaret Holden. She would marry my third great grandfather, Richard Hardman, and they had a struggle back in England at that particular time when she was very young. And as you probably know, the children at that time went to work in the factories at a very young age. And she had been hurt on a weaving machine. My family back there were actually weavers and rope makers. But anyway, Margaret was hurt on a weaving machine as a child, and she suffered with the inner legs, had a hard time getting around and walking, and it caused a lot of other problems with her. In fact, after she had married, she lost 7 of her first 8 children at birth or within just a few months after they were being born.
Oh, my goodness.
And caused some great suffering for her and her husband, Richard. Well, one day a knock come on her door, and it was a man named Brigham Young. And he was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and he was serving in England as a missionary. And he was teaching the people over there about a young man named Joseph Smith, who had seen a vision of God and Jesus Christ, and had actually received gold plates and translated them into a book called the Book of Mormon. My family over there received one of these books and read it and believed that it was true and decided that they wanted to be baptized and join the church. So in 1839, Brigham Young baptized them as members of the Mormon Church. It wasn't long before they decided that they needed to save their money and emigrate to the United States. So they worked hard and saved their money and got on a ship and crossed the Atlantic Ocean. That was quite a feat just within itself. The families were crammed together in tight quarters. For the first several days that they were on the ship, they were seasick. They had very little to eat, and what was even worse, they had very little means of cooking the food that they had brought with them. The stoves that were provided, they had to use used rope or canvas and small amounts of wood to cook their food, but they got through it. And they ended up landing on the Gulf of Mexico in the Mississippi River and came up the Mississippi River into Nauvoo, Illinois in 1845. There, when they arrived, Brigham Young had not only baptized them, became their friend, and had a place for them to live there on the Mississippi River. Richard Hardman worked on a paddle boat, and for a couple of years there, they had a great life together. I've got to back up and tell you a little bit more about Margaret. So after Margaret had these children and only one survived, one night she had a dream, and she saw a man in this dream that came to her and placed his hands upon her head and gave her a blessing, and that after that she was able to have children that survived. She told Brigham Young about this man, and he described him as being one of the other apostles, Wilford Woodruff. And upon their meeting, he placed his hand upon her head and gave her a blessing and told her that she would have a son that would survive. And he even gave her a name for that son. She was to name him Lehi Nephi Hardman. And of course, Lehi and Nephi were 2 prophets within the Book of Mormon that they believed in. Well, she got pregnant and had this little boy and named him Lehi Nephi. And he came with them across the Atlantic Ocean into Nauvoo. They lived in Nauvoo for only a couple years in peace and happiness before things started to happen in a bad way. Their prophet, Joseph Smith, was killed, and just a few months after that, Margaret's husband, Richard, was murdered. Somehow she made it through that time of grieving and ended up moving and ended up in Council Bluffs, Nebraska. There she met another man who his name was William Presley, and he had lost his wife and several children to cholera. They joined together and were married and began to plan their trip to come to the Great Salt Lake Valley. It took them a while to get prepared. They had to get their oxen together and all of their supplies together, but eventually they did. And they headed out to the Great Salt Lake on a wagon train. And unfortunately, 2 weeks out on the trail, William Presley and his 17-year-old son took sick and was diagnosed with cholera and passed away and were buried there on the trail.
God.
Yeah, they went through some rough times. You know, that trail from that area to Salt Lake is 989 miles. I was reading a history a few weeks ago on not only the Mormon pioneers, but all of the pioneers that came across that trail and ended up in Oregon and California. And it says that at least every mile there is one pioneer that's buried along the route.
Wow.
Well, after William Presley passed away, their son Lehi was now 11 years old, and he would become the man of the family. He had a pony that he would ride alongside the oxen, and now he was the boss of the oxen. He'd have to harness them and hook them to the wagon. And he told some amazing stories about crossing the plains as an 11-year-old boy. He said that at different times and different places, the bison that would number in the millions would come right down and were not afraid of the wagons or the pioneers, and they would walk right alongside the wagons and the oxen. And he said that when that happened, that oftentimes the oxen would spook and explode and run off with the herds or cause a stampede with the bison, and people would be stomped to death or run over the top of in that stampede and killed. Well, anyway, so what Lehi would do at that particular time, if the bison got close to the wagon, is he would tie his pony behind the wagon. And he would then climb up on the tongue between the two oxen, put his hands on them and gently talk to them. And they'd be able to calm down and without incident continue along. They came into the valley of the Great Salt Lake in September of that year, and there was Brigham Young, their friend, to meet them. He was saddened to hear what had happened to Margaret's husband and actually found a little place for him to live right down on the Jordan River, about 5 miles from the main town of Salt Lake City. The next day when they woke up and needed to get some wood and some supplies, Brigham Young had told them to walk down the river, cross the bridge, and see a man named Abraham Coon. So Lehi did. He went down, knocked on the door, and met Abraham Coon. And a long relationship would start between the two of them. Years later, he would marry one of Abraham Coon's daughters, Frances Ann, and raise a family. Both he and Abraham's sons would be the third and fourth pioneer that would come into the Magna area and settle that area. Abraham Coon was a man of means. His family said that all he had to do was give him an axe and he could build a bridge. In fact, he did build a bridge. He built one across the Jordan River and made a toll bridge, charged a penny a wagon to come across it. He also, after settling in the Magna area, there's a canyon out there named after him called Coon Canyon and also Coon Peak. And Abraham Coon made a road up the bottom of Coon Canyon so the pioneers could go up and retrieve wood out of that canyon. He also built a sawmill up there, and that was kind of his spot in life. He was sent on a mission to Carson City where he built a sawmill down there also. But anyway, Abraham Coon was a Pennsylvania Dutch. His wife was a Yarborough, and her family had been here in the United States since 1630. Her family had fought in the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. So there was some great history there that was added to Lehi. His mother, Margaret, that the story starts out with, she would live 10 more years here in the valley and enjoy her family and have peace and happiness. And then she would be buried there in Salt Lake in the Pioneer Cemetery with so many other pioneers at that particular time. Lehigh and Francis Ann and the Coons that settled out there. There was a little settlement established out there called Coonville, and that predated Pleasant Green, which was actually the name given to the area before it was renamed Magna. Just a little bit of history there for you.
So how did it get renamed to Magna?
Okay, let me tell you about that. So the next...
Zach, what do you know about this?
What do you know about that, Zach? Anything?
Oh, so many arguments over what the name was and where the border was. It was called Coonville, and then it was changed to Magna, and people didn't want to change it to Magna. It's quite interesting. You hear quite a few different perspectives on it.
I actually love the name Magna. It's just so, it's like a Viking name, Magna, you know.
Yeah, it is. So Mayan Utah would forever change when Colonel Enos A. Wall hired two young men, and their names were Daniel C. Jackling and Robert G. Cromwell. And they believed that the low-grade ore could be financially profitable in the pit or in the mine if large quantities of soil was taken off the top of this mountain that was made an open pit. And so Daniel C. Jackman, Sean, became the father of that area out there. In 1906, the Utah Copper Company began its open pit operation, and soon after that, construction began on the Arthur and Magna Mills, as John had mentioned. And that was on the hills above Magna, which was then known as Pleasant Green. Now, there were several settlements out there. There were the settlement that I was talking about, at Coonville. There was also a little town that was a settlement called Ragtown, and another one that was called Snaketown. And at that particular time, the only real city out there was Pleasant Green, which was our original Magna. But the post office was having problems at that particular time, and they couldn't distinguish between Pleasant Green and Pleasant Grove, a city that about 30 miles south of Pleasant Green. And so they flipped the coin, and we lost the coin toss and had to have a new name. Well, they went to Daniel C. Jackman, who was the founder of the Utah Copper Company and the mining out in that area. He had built up a railroad out there. He had accomplished so many amazing things. He had brought immigrants in from all over the different nations of the world. In our museum, on the walls of our museum, we have 35 flags that represent all the different nations that came in. Some of the first groups that came in were the Greek and the Italians, but later the Japanese and all these other countries came to work. And Daniel C. Jackman was the one that put them all to work at Kennecott. And so it fell to him to give us a new name out there. And as you know, he chose the name Magna, which is a Latin word meaning great, powerful. And so that's where we got our name.
Oh, fantastic.
Interestingly, I just noticed recently, I was looking at some Sanborn fire maps, if you're familiar with those insurance maps.
Yeah.
And on those 1916, it's the label is Pleasant Green Post Office Magna. So even as late as 1916, they were still calling it Pleasant Green.
Yeah, it was 1931 when the name was actually changed to Magna.
So it's later than I thought. I was.
Oh, yeah.
I went away really early.
One of those great treasures that you talk about finding in the museum, we recently found a document out there that was the voting district, and it showed how the precincts were broken up in that area. And same thing there, John. It was titled Pleasant Green.
I'll be. So it's in the 30s. Wow, that is kind of late, huh?
Yep.
Wow. Your museum is the only museum in the area. Am I right about that? It's the only one I saw on the map app.
Yes, it is. We have a museum that sits about 15 miles away in Grantsville, and that's actually a Donner museum, the Donner Reed Party. And then we have a museum in Tooele, which is about the same distance, and they actually have a couple museums there, and I just visited one a few weeks ago, and it's a really nice, a lot of great displays there. It's actually run by the sons of the Utah pioneers.
Your museum is so special because of what it does and what it represents to the area and its history. What are challenges that you have or opportunities that you have for preserving history in the area?
There are so many challenges, I think. It's such a big subject, too. I mean, as I've been looking at it, and as I say, I'm the newest member of this group, that realization, we're not just representing Magna and the mining and people of Magna, but we are Utah's ethnic and mining museum of Magna. So we really, in our name, I believe we have a mandate to represent all of the mining in that part of the valley, Bingham and all of the activities and all of those ethnic groups that came not just to Magna and the mills and the smelters, but also the mines of Bingham and the Mormon pioneers that settled that area. And it's a huge mandate in my mind.
It really is.
It's a big challenge, and one that I got the impression may have languished a little bit over the years. The museum's been there, was established in 1996. Is that right, Kevin?
Yeah, it was first thought of back in 1980, but it took a long time to really put it together.
And it came together, and I'm not sure what's been going on out there for a long time. It's just in the last 8 or 10 years that it seems to have kind of taken off and had the interest that it kind of deserves, but it really needs a lot more. It needs more funding, needs more expertise.
Yeah, because your history is so rich. I mean, it's just
It is. I think our museum really struggled for the last few years because we were hit by a 5.3 earthquake. I believe that was in 2020. And then we were hit with COVID. And then we were hit with a drunk driver.
Right.
I was out in front of the museum a few weeks ago, and I had a big adobe brick. I was propping the door open, and somebody walked by and they said, "Are you going to throw that through the window?" And I said, "No, there's been enough things thrown through the window." So,
well, talk about the founding of your organization. You talk about how that happened.
Zach here. This seems like a perfect time for me to kind of go over the timeline of the museum and kind of what happened with it. So, as we know, our museum started off as a J.C. Penney store, which started in 1917 and went on to about 1970. Then, as Kevin said, in 1990, Utah's Ethic and Mining Museum of Magna became an official corporation. And it took a few years to complete the repairs, grants, and just general cleanup that the museum needed. And during that time, Kennecott actually started to pay $100 a year for 10 years, and they were paying that to the museum committee so that they could fulfill their lease agreement to the property owner. And then from around 1994 to 97, the museum was in desperate need of renovations, and the artifacts had just been collecting dust, and plans for different amount of income were failing. There was talk actually to move the museum, and it was going to change the building to the local Webster School. But it would have been about $2.2 million to renovate. So the museum is still in the J.C. Penney store. And then around 1998, the building that the museum is in was actually purchased from Magna Investment Corp. and by the Salt Lake County and was appropriated to $300,000 for remodeling. And then a year later, we went into two different phases. Phase one was initiated for electrical and mechanical work, primarily reinforcing walls to meet earthquake standards and a brick wall out front. And then afterwards, we started phase two, which was primarily interior work, such as building an office, a theater, a collection room, and interior displays. From 2001 to 2006, Salt Lake County cut the museum's budget, and the money that was needed to complete some projects dried up, and it created about a decade's worth of setbacks. In 2007, the museum committee purchased the property in October for $30,000, which was donated by Ron Henline, who purchased it. And we had about a balance of $120,000 that were due 2 years later. And all that actually ended up being excused by the Salt Lake County. And the museum was actually donated to the community. And on, as Kevin said, March 18th in 2020, our museum experienced a really bad earthquake. And it took quite a bit of grant money to take care of the repairs. And then, as we've said, last year in 2023 on New Year's Day, we had a drunk driver go through the front of the building, and it took a bunch of money from the state and time and repairs. And that leads us up to today, where we are open and guests are able to come in, enjoy the history that we are all very happy to share.
Wow. You guys have been through such a lot.
Yeah, but the museum's still standing.
Yeah, you bet. And Zach, thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I'd like to provide listeners with the contact information for the organization. Their address is 9056 West Magna Main Street, Magna, Utah. And I hope all of you go down and visit that are in Utah, in Salt Lake, in Magna. Go down and visit them and please donate. You can phone them at 801-698-0226. And on Facebook, just look for the Ethnic Mining Museum of Magna. And if you want to send a mail, send it to P.O. Box 742, Magna, Utah 84044. Does that sound right, Kevin?
That's correct.
Great. Kevin, how does your organization serve the community and what are its primary goals?
Well, there's a lot of different ways we serve the community. Magna is an amazing hub of volunteers. And let me give you an example of that. So I received a call just a couple nights ago from one of the church groups in our community, and they wanted to have between 40 and 60 volunteers show up one day and help clean the museum. Our volunteers also have done a tremendous job. Just this year alone, of our 40 volunteers, we have 746 hours of volunteer time just from them. What's interesting about our community and the people that live there is that from this damage that we've had so many people that have stepped up and helped our museum. And it's the people that are descendants of the early miners that came into that area. A lot of them are the Greek and the Italians. And a lot of the displays that we have within our museum are their family displays. Shoemaker shop, and many others. And so they step up and really help us out a lot with what we need to accomplish.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense because you guys protect that and display it. That's got to be exciting for them. Thank you for that, Kevin.
Yep.
What exciting events or exhibitions should the community keep an eye out for at your organization?
Zach here. I would probably say that any big events or holidays that go on in Magna, there's not really anything that the museum isn't open for. We love engaging with the community, be it 4th of July, or even in the winter, we'll open up and maybe have hot chocolate or something to share with the community.
We have a arts display that comes up in the summertime. We also have on almost every Friday night, we have a movie in the park. And that's started by a group, a local group that plays a lot of music for the kids and people. And then we go into that movie. We also have car shows. And Magna Main Street is a car show capital of the world. We're constantly doing things there. That arts festival that we have is actually planned this year for August the 24th. And I tell you a little bit about that. So a few years ago, I met an older gentleman in Magna, and he and I became dear friends. And he was an artist and taught me, we would go out on the desert and take pictures of wild horses, which we have an amazing herd of wild horses not far from Magna. And then we would come back and we would draw these horses, and he taught me how to do some pencil art. Well, anyway, we had this art festival, and he said, you need to take one of your pieces down there. And I said, oh, no, I couldn't do that. Anyway, we did. He took an article, and I took one, and we took it down. It was actually in our library. And when we went down to pick him up, guess what? I had a ribbon, and he didn't. And I said, well, that's what happens when the master teaches you.
Yeah.
So, and that art has come in real handy in the museum. I actually painted a mural on one of the walls in the museum after our damage. Zach and I had to sheetrock a wall, and that was quite an experience, learning how to mud the wall. What is that?
Oh, absolutely. Kevin's definitely been quite a mentor. And yeah, his art is pretty amazing. You need to come see it at the museum.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mentioned earlier a gentleman that serves on our board, Tim Draper. He's the plumber and I'm the electrician. And so between the two of us, we can really get in a lot of trouble.
A lot of good things, I'm sure. Can you recount any particularly memorable visitor experiences or feedback?
Just last week, we got a call on Saturday or Sunday saying, hey, we got a group of foreign exchange students from Japan coming into the museum on Monday. We're not normally open on Monday. Anybody come down and help out with tours? So I dropped in, and it was a great experience. We had translators with the group, split the group up into 2 or 3 small groups and walked them through the museum. And it was a great chance to kind of tell some of the stories that I've heard and learned over the years, or over the last few months. And yeah, it was just a lot of fun. And these high school students had a lot of interesting questions. They had a different perspective, obviously, on how things are. And it was interesting to have people there who didn't know any of the history. Their translator pointed at a portrait of George Washington that's on the wall there and said, who's that? And they all kind of looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders. Like, we're not used to that. It would be like asking me who the Emperor of Japan is.
Yeah.
No, it was just a really fun experience to show the museum to a group like that.
That would be neat.
You know, it's been interesting, Sean, and working at the museum and volunteering there is that it's opened up my life into everywhere I go, I want to go check out a museum. And I know John's been doing this too. Maybe Zach does it also. But recently, my wife and I took a trip to Alaska, and we hit every museum up there. And it's been interesting to be in the museum and to have visitors come there and tell us that they are curators or leads in a museum. Last year, I had a couple that came in from England, and they were visiting here in Utah and doing some genealogy, and they heard about our museum and came out, and we had a great visit.
Fantastic. What types of exhibits can visitors explore at your facility?
Oh, my heck. When they first come in, the first thing that a lot of them see, and we mention to them, are these 35 flags, full-size flags that are up on the wall that represent all the nations that came to Magna to work at the mining industry. But there's so much more as we travel around. And it's really interesting museum because we are all volunteers there. And because we do not have a curator, we go through the board and say, hey, we would like to create an exhibit to do this, and we do. And to reflect upon, different types of histories and people that have lived in Magna. Just recently, we received a donation from a man who is a sculptor. And what he does is he creates, it almost looks like a bronze, but it is made out of all welded parts. And he brought down it's actually a covered wagon, a Pioneer covered wagon. And it's about 24 inches long and 12 inches wide and probably 18 inches tall. His wife actually sewed the canvas together to make the canvas top on the wagon and the little bags that go with it. And so our museum continues to evolve with all these different displays. One of the greatest displays we have is that of salt air. And I don't know if you know much about salt air, but what salt air was that in the turn of the century, the end of the 1800s, on January 14, 1893, it was announced that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints would construct a resort that would be known as Salt Air. It would become the most magnificent in a long line of resorts. Famed Utah architect Richard Cletting received the opportunity. He designed a Moorish-style pavilion that was painted in bright colors and in every sense promised fun. It was actually built out on the Great Salt Lake, and it was built in 3 to 6 feet of water, and it took 10,000 pilings driven into the Great Salt Lake for this building to be built on. And it was an amazing event. It was opened on Memorial Day in 1893, and on its first day, it received 10,000 visitors. A train brought guests to the resort from Salt Lake City. These visitors had gotten to Salt Lake from all over the world for this attraction. Its main attractions were always swimming and in the Great Salt Lake. And I don't know if you know much about the Great Salt Lake, but for those that listen to this, the salt content in it is so high that you can't sink. You bob like a cork. Anyway, we have an amazing salt air display there at the museum. And it's a replica. We actually have a couple swimsuits there that were women's swimsuits. And it was interesting when the woman went swimming in the Great Salt Lake, the swimsuits covered everything. And everything except from about the ankle down, and they were supposed to wear black socks at that particular time. But anyway, over the 30 years, there was a lot of added attractions up there, rowboats, merry-go-round, Ferris wheel, and a giant roller coaster. My dad tells a story that how his uncle came from New York and went out in the salt air. And what the biggest attraction was out there after swimming was that the greatest bands in the world played out there. And so the young people would dance the night away. And my dad tells a story about one of his uncles that came out for a visit and got on the roller coaster, and it was such a rough ride that he lost his false teeth. Fell out and fell in 6 feet of water, and they never did find him again.
Oh, my goodness.
The dance floor in that pavilion at the time was the largest sprung dance floor in the world.
What do you mean by sprung?
Sprung meaning as it had physical springs underneath.
Oh,
so that as
goodness.
the dancers would dance, the floor would take the shock of that, would kind of bounce along with them.
Oh, I bet that was cool.
Yeah, it was quite a thing. Unfortunately, the last great iteration of that building burned down in 1972.
Oh.
Yeah.
I remember hearing about it. I remember seeing salt air from the freeway as we drove by. I never got a chance to go out there though.
Yeah, so in the museum we have that display, and it's a beautiful display.
A big
yes.
scale model of the pavilion. It's
10 feet wide. Mm-hmm.
Probably about 6 feet by
6 feet by 6.
It's a big construction.
All the resorts today are probably up in the mountains in Park City, aren't they?
Well, there's the lagoon.
Oh, that's
Park,
right, lagoon.
At the time was actually built as contemporary with salt air. Was built on the Bamberger Railway as a way for Bamberger to make money by getting people on his trains. His trains ran from Salt Lake to Ogden, and so he built this place in Farmington. So Farmington's, well, it was right up against the Wasatch Mountains, kind of on the east shore of the Great Salt Lake. And that amusement park originally was built on the shores of the lake, but that east shoreline was just never as conducive to entertainment or being in the water like salt air was. So Lagoon still exists. There are a couple of remnants of buildings there from the original resort.
Yeah, I believe actually some of the roller coaster from the wooden roller coaster at Lagoon was built from the roller coaster that was at the Saltaire.
Oh, cool. Wow, what history. That's amazing.
Yeah,
man.
sadly, Saltaire was plagued by fires.
Yeah.
It really was.
Burned down. The pavilion burned down twice. They had a rough time.
Must have been some poor electrical work.
Iteration got flooded out right after they built it.
Well, let's talk about fires. If your building were to catch fire, what things would you grab on your way out?
Oh,
Well, I know what I'd grab. I'd grab the saltwater taffy dish.
there is a wedding dress in the back. It's kind of hiding away back there. It's an amazing dress from one of the Greek families, I believe. And I haven't seen it but 2 or 3 times, but every time I've seen it, I'm just absolutely blown away. I would find a hand truck. I would save that thing. It is amazing.
Yeah, I always kind of had a little plan set up. If I could only grab like a small handful of things, I'd probably grab a bunch of the yearbooks from the local high schools. But what's kind of nice is our back room, we have a bunch of large, fairly portable shelving, just full of artifacts and documents and books. And it's really close to a big double door that leads to the outside. So if there was a fire, my plan is to grab as much as I can and just, throw it out the door, start pulling the whole shelf if I can, because damaged is a lot better than ash, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We do have a dish that sits on the front counter where our volunteers sit, and it's full of saltwater taffy. And I would grab a piece of that, but that 10,000 piece of Native American pottery, oh wow, that's got to be one of my favorite there in the museum. That would be my grab.
Probably important to save.
Right.
Listen, I'm sorry to interrupt, guys, but it's time for us to take a break for a few minutes.
Sounds great.
All right, listeners, we'll be right back after this important message about everyone making a visit to the Utah Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna.
Discover the vibrant history of Magna at Utah's Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna. Located at 9056 West Magna Main Street, the museum offers an engaging experience for all visitors, highlighting the rich cultural and mining heritage of the area. Explore the captivating exhibits, attend special events, and take behind-the-scenes tours. With exhibits about local Native Americans, Utah pioneers, mining companies, the legendary Pony Express, and the history and ethnic cultures of the area. There's always something new to see and learn at the museum. Your visit helps support their mission to preserve and share the fascinating history of the community. While there's no admission fee, every visitor donation contributes directly to their operations, educational programs, exhibits, and community outreach efforts. Planning your visit is easy. Come see them at 9056 West Magna Main Street or give them a call at 801-698-0226 for more information. Stay updated on upcoming events and exhibits by following them on Facebook at Ethnic Mining Museum of Magna.
Join us at Utah's Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna today. Be a part of something truly special. Dive into history, connect with fellow enthusiasts, and make a lasting impact on our community's heritage. Visit us, call us, or connect with us on Facebook. Your adventure into Magna's history starts here.
When I was new, I was solid as a rock and ready for work. I could carry 1,700 pounds. My frame was made of hickory, poplar, and my tongue from an ash tree. I was sold to Bill and Mary, They loaded me up almost every week with all manner of things to haul. Spot and Brownie were hitched up to me and we all went along to town. I also hauled things the family needed from town back to the farm. When Mary died suddenly, they put her in me for the gentle final ride to the cemetery. Bill kept using me all the time, through all kinds of weather. I took a beating over those years. Then, for a long time, I stood behind the barn, alongside the thresher, unmoving and slowly rusting. I watched machines go by, hauling more than I can. Finally, I was loaded on the back of a flatbed truck, and they took me to a workshop. There, I was lovingly refurbished. They made sure all my parts were put back like new, and my wheels turned again. I was parked inside a museum. Electric lights show me off, and every day, people talk about how I'm made, how beautiful my wood is, and sometimes, occasionally, someone mentions Mary and Bill. I feel so proud that I can help others understand the past, which I guess I'm now a part of.
Rather than throwing it out, please donate historical records and objects to your local historical society today.
This is Derek Scott, President of the Chilton County Historical Society, located in Clanton, Alabama, and I listen to Sean Thomas Radcliff and Preservation Oaks on Microstream Radio.
This is Paul Hackbarth, outgoing president and now the marketing and communications director of the Iowa Falls Historical Society in Iowa Falls, Iowa. I had a lot of fun as a guest on Preservation Oaks.
This is James Burns, neurodiverse freelance curator, and you're listening to Preservation Oaks.
And now, back to Preservation Oaks.
Welcome back to Preservation Oaks. We're here today with Kevin Hardman, Jon Clark, and Zach Hewett from the Utah Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna, Utah. Guys, we've learned so much. This is great. You have so much history and so much to offer. Thank you for the information you provided to our audience about your organization, and welcome back.
Great to be back with you.
Guys, how is your organization approaching the digitization of its documents and photographs for future accessibility?
So Zach here, I can actually talk on that. So while I was attending Salt Lake Community College, I was actually able to take a class that allowed me to take many photographs from our museum and digitize them and kind of get that whole process going and kind of start creating a digital archive. Unfortunately, though, all my data became corrupt and I lost all the work I had done before I was able to make a backup.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but thankfully, when it comes to organizing, cataloging, and taking in a bunch of the museum's owned and donated artifacts, our secretary, Aida, she's actually been doing a lot of really good work herself when it comes to that. And I know that she's been working with volunteers, teaching them the process and how to take in our records.
Well, that's fantastic. That's great. What percentage of your collection would you say you've got digitized or cataloged?
I would probably estimate about 5 to 10%, considering we're still discovering a bit of our collection each day.
Okay. Yeah, it's an ongoing thing for most organizations, and most organizations are still struggling to get everything photographed and everything digitized. It's quite a bit of work.
Oh, yes. It's very, very new for us.
Well, hopefully you've got volunteers that'll help you with that.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Now, how is your organization funded, and what are your financial goals for the current year?
I could talk a little bit about that. We are funded through some of the local businesses, Real Tinnell, Northrop Grumman, some of the local smaller businesses like Bingham Dental, and we receive visitor donations. When we were damaged, we actually had one of the local bar and grill down in Magna They held a raffle and got a hold of us and said, hey, we've had a raffle and we have $1,000 for you. We also have other organizations that help us there, like Knights of Columbus. I think the biggest thing that's going to really help us is that for many years, we have not been a city. And May 1st, we became Magna City.
Oh, cool.
And our new mayor, our councilmen are very into our museum. They love it. And I think that that's going to be our next great step in being able to accomplish those tasks that we need to accomplish financially with the museum.
Oh, fantastic. Thanks for that. So what kind of fundraising activities or opportunities are available to support your organization's mission? Do you do online shopping of coins, or can people buy a brick, or, how does all that work?
We have a small gift shop. That's about all we've got right now.
Okay, very cool.
One of the things that excites me is the fact that with my wife's grant writing background, I'm hoping that we'll be able to acquire some funding through grants. We need to identify some very specific needs and come up with some really specific goals as a board. But we've identified over 100 potential foundations that support organizations like ours. And my wife is ready to start typing as soon as we get a few things lined up.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I'm really excited about the possibilities there.
We are all excited about that.
So this is sort of the ground floor for you guys. I mean, in taking a new direction, it's sort of the ground floor to contribute, for people to volunteer, contribute, and make a difference.
Yes, it really is. We have a couple board members that have been around for about 20 years, about the entire progress of the museum. And they passed it on to this younger generation. And if they call us young, most of those are retirees. But anyway, we're hoping to move it to the next step.
Fantastic. How do you collaborate with schools to educate students about local history?
Well, I actually went around to the schools and talked to them. One of the problems that we have in our museum is that we have inadequate heating and cooling. But I have talked to the schools, and we're hoping to get some funds so that we can have adequate heating during the winter months when the schools are there, and we can get them to come out and start an annual, maybe the 5th grade class every year from a certain school to come and be part of the museum. We do have classrooms that come in now and on their own. We just had a group that come in from summer school a few weeks ago. And so we do get a few classes in, but not like we really want to start getting.
Yeah, very cool. Now, volunteers are everything, and we all love volunteers. What volunteer opportunities are available for community members looking to get involved?
Well, as Zach and John mentioned, when I'm there at the museum, which is quite often, with our volunteers, and as I mentioned, we have 40 volunteers, and they are amazing volunteers. We have volunteers that speak Spanish. We have one volunteer that speaks Tagalog. She's from the Philippines. We have volunteers that like to come in and just make sure the building's open and sit and relax and read a little history themselves. But we have others that come in and want to help with the displays and cleaning. And so we have so many volunteers. We have young volunteers too. Zach, you can't see him, but he's 30 years old. And he mentioned Aida Trochet. She's also a very young volunteer. And both of them are going to school at the University of Utah and becoming a great asset to our museum. We also have a volunteer that's an archaeologist, or at least going to school to be an archaeologist.
Oh, cool.
And so she is great to have there at the museum also.
Oh, yeah.
But we're working more than that. We're working on getting young volunteers there. We have some young volunteers. Wyatt, he has been our volunteer for like 3 years, and he had just graduated high school, along with a friend of his named Charlie. She comes and helps us out also. We also have 2 young volunteers that come with their mother who volunteers with us, Ashton and Dee. And they're always anxious to be at the museum and help out. So we have no lack of volunteers. We love them and appreciate all that they do for the museum.
Fantastic. How can people best support your organization financially, and what are the available donation methods?
We have a sign when they come in, and the reason we don't charge admission is because, as Zach was talking about the founding of the museum, the county gave us a chunk of money and also a credit so that we could own that museum as a board. But they still carry the title on that museum for one more year. And that's the reason that they asked us that they would carry that title as long as we didn't charge admission to get in. And that's not our goal. We don't want to charge admission. We love that people can come in and with any background financially and walk into that museum and see our great displays. So we're really hoping that John's wife can help us to get the grants that we need to continue to do that.
Yeah, that'd be great. What current projects or needs does your organization have that the community can get behind and support? You mentioned climate control.
Insulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The museum needs to be properly insulated and air conditioned year round, not just for our comfort, but to protect the collection, collect the things that are in that building.
It would be nice to have guests be able to come in all throughout the year instead of just a season.
Oh, yeah.
Or holiday events.
What's that going to take? Do you have an estimate of what that's going to take so that community members know here's what it's going to take in terms of collecting money?
Yes, we've actually had some bids taken, and we figure it's going to be probably around $40,000.
Okay. All right. That's a pretty good price. That's a pretty good
It
price.
is. It is.
Bad.
You know, we talked to the county last year, and it was a hard year for everyone, I believe.
Oh, yeah.
And they struggled themselves. They laid people off and really struggled financially. And so we're hoping that the economy turns a little bit. These grants will be above and beyond. But we're hoping that, you know, somewhere along the line, the county and Magna City, now that we're a city, will help us out financially.
Oh, yeah, that would be great. You know, some of the organizations that I've interviewed have a tax that the city has imposed on the residents, and it's a certain percentage that everybody pays in their city taxes, and that goes directly to the museum.
Salt Lake County has the Zoo Arts and Parks Fund. It's a tax that's paid by everyone in Salt Lake County, and it's a matter of applying for the grant. It's top of our list. Grant, I believe those are due in January or February, first of the year kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's the top of our list. That's a kind of almost like shooting fish in a barrel, if I dare be that.
Yeah, I think we also, besides that, John, I think we also have another opportunity too. We have a man who is actually part of our mayorship, and he may be our mayor next year. He's going to run. He was also a member of our museum board years ago and volunteer. He does a lot for our museum. He sent a group of people down to clean our windows when we were getting ready to open this year. He provides a beautiful pot of flowers outside the museum. So, you know, if he gets in as mayor, we probably have a little bit of an in to get some finances to help the museum. And they love the museum.
Yeah.
I think they've just all felt like they've been in between a rock and a hard place also.
And really, you know, I don't think anybody would mind paying a certain percentage, as long as it's reasonable, a certain percentage of their tax dollars to go to the museum, because it's that important.
Yeah, I think that we'll look at something like that. That'd be really interesting. Yeah, the people of Magna are very generous. Let me just give you a quick example. On the 4th of July, a year ago, when we were damaging down, we actually opened the doors so that people could come in. We roped off the damaged area, but they could come in and still use the restroom. And Zach was making some great snow cones. But anyway, I just took one of the old boots there from the boot shop and walked down the street and just told people who I was and that we were looking just for a little donation to help. And I've only gone 20 or 30 minutes and come back with $200 to help with the museum. So the people in Magna are very generous, and I think a tax would help us a lot.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Guys, in what ways does your organization uniquely contribute to the community, and why is its role so crucial?
For the small amount of time that I've been there, I've seen a lot of different type of people come into the museum, and each person has their own different reaction to it. And I think that each person has their own individual reaction, but a lot of it that I see is there's people that are from the area, and people are always amazed to see what they know already that are in the museum. I can't tell you how many people I've had come into the museum, look at photographs and go, oh, that's my aunt, that's my grandfather, I went to school with that person. So it's a lot of ways of not only connecting people to their own history and friends, but also connects just the whole community together as well.
Yeah, let me tell you a little example about Rio Tinto. And so I believe that probably what has happened there with their connection with the museum, they have received new people. And so these new people that come there as their leaders in Rio Tinto mining didn't know that we even existed. And, you know, between the earthquake and COVID and the year we were shut down, they are back and in full force. We received a check from them to help us with the museum, and we now have their love and support. And I think it just took, rattling a few tails, shaking the bell, and just letting know people that the museum's there. Everywhere I go, whether it's the bakery, the gas station, I always say, hey, did you know we had a museum in Magna? And we have so many new people that have moved into Magna. Our population doubled, that most of them don't even know that we have a museum on Main Street of Magna. So I think it's getting out and really communicating with the community.
Yeah, there should be a big billboard somewhere saying, go this way, and here's the Magna Museum down here. Something like that, because just in our conversation, I formed an impression that there are many things in the museum and the history of Magna that people would be surprised at if they go and visit the museum.
Yeah, we are really trying to get the advertisement out there. And here's one of the problems that we face in Magna is that we are growing at such an amazing pace. We have added probably 10,000 to our population in the last 2 years. They're building a brand new high school for us. And all around that high school, it was nothing but farm ground. And now it's condos and apartments and homes. And so we have an influx. We're still Utah's ethnic area. And we have, some amazing people moving in here from all over the globe, being part of Magna once again. And so, yes, we need to get the word out to them.
I've noticed that too, that here in this area, we have Polynesians, we have a lot of Asian influence. It's a great melting pot.
Yes, it is. And Magna's even more so, I believe. So, yes, we have a lot of work ahead of us.
Is there any additional message or important information you'd like to share with your community?
Our museum has just about anything for everyone. If you love fossils, all the way up to space travel, we have it. We have different items from NASA. Kevin brings a bunch of things that's pretty amazing that he's found, a bunch of fossils of fish and dinosaurs. Pretty much you can find something you'll like.
Yeah, let me tell you a little experience of that. So Tim Draper and I are great rock hounds, and so is my wife and my grandkids, and we go out constantly. And two of those little grandkids are Parley and Talmadge. And we had been out rock hounding, and I decided to make a new spot in the museum for these rocks and fossils. And I put a little label on the bottom of it. This has been donated by two young men, Parley and Talmadge Hardman. And these two little grandsons came to the museum with me one day and was wandering around the museum looking around, and they saw their names on this display case. And they were like, oh my heck. And I told him, I said, Parting Talmadge, I'm an old man and I am not going to be part of this museum for that much longer. Now, what's going to happen when I'm gone? And they looked at me and they said, Grandpa, don't worry. We're going to come down and take over and make sure it keeps going.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, legacy. Kevin, Zach, John, I want to thank you for spending time with us today. I've learned so much, had a great time. I'm so glad to meet you. I want to congratulate you once again on your reopening. It's been great to learn that the Utah Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna is alive and well and will continue to serve your community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And with that, we'll end our time with our guests, Kevin Hardman, Zach Hewett, and Jon Clark. Listeners, please stay tuned for my comments and wrap-up, which is coming up next. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Preservation Oaks podcast, where we've had the distinct pleasure of hosting Kevin Hardman, Zach Hewett, and Jon Clark from Utah's Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna. Located in the heart of Magna, Utah, this museum is a testament to the rich and diverse history of the Salt Lake Valley, and our guests today have demonstrated just how dedicated, knowledgeable, and passionate they are about preserving and sharing this heritage. We're particularly honored to have featured these three remarkable individuals. Kevin, Zach, and John are not just volunteers. They are devoted preservationists who selflessly give their time and expertise to serve the Magna City community. Their combined skills and experiences are making a significant impact on the museum, which stands as a beacon of history, culture, and community in this rapidly growing area. Utah's Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna has recently faced significant challenges, including the devastating incident on January 1st, 2023, when a drunk driver crashed a pickup truck into the museum. The extensive damage required 14 months and $80,000 in restoration efforts. But thanks to the perseverance of our guests and the support of the community, the museum triumphantly reopened in April 2024. Today, we can proudly say, welcome back to this cherished institution. The future of the museum is bright, but it's not without its challenges. As Magna continues to grow with its population doubling in the last 5 years and expected to double again in the next 5, the museum stands on the horizon of significant positive change. With Magna now a city, there are promising opportunities for additional funding to address high-priority needs at the museum. The most pressing of these is the installation of insulation and HVAC to protect the historical collection and ensure year-round operation, a project estimated at around $40,000. Additionally, the museum requires building upgrades, including climate-controlled storage, archive space, and improved lighting in exhibits. These enhancements are crucial to preserving the rich history and culture that the museum represents. Magna's history is deeply intertwined with mining and smelting, tracing back to the early days of the Bingham Canyon mine. The town's name, Magna, comes from the Latin word for great or large, reflecting the significance of its mining operation. Our guests today have provided us with an extraordinary glimpse into the history of the Salt Lake and Magna area, from the prehistoric Lake Bonneville to the days of Native American inhabitants, and from early Pleasant Green to the establishment of Magna as we know it today. Their stories have painted a vivid picture of the area's past, bringing to life the courage of early Mormon pioneers and the evolution of a community that has thrived against the odds. The museum is not just a representation of Magna's mining heritage, but a celebration of the diverse ethnic nationalities that have contributed to the area's rich tapestry. Flags from over 35 different nations are proudly displayed, symbolizing the people who settled and worked in Magna. As Utah's Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna, this institution represents all of Utah, and its mission to honor and preserve this history is carried out with great determination and dedication. Despite the challenges faced over the last decade, from budget shortfalls to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, an earthquake, and the recent crash damage, the museum has remained a steadfast resource for the community and the state of Utah. The time is now for the museum to receive the support it deserves, both financially and through community involvement. With the continued growth of Magna and the potential for city and county funding, there's a real opportunity for the museum to thrive in the coming years. The community should also be encouraged by the museum's efforts to attract younger board members and volunteers, ensuring that the legacy of the institution will continue for generations to come. The museum's resilience was evident on July 4th last year when, despite the damage, they opened their doors and within 20 minutes, visitors had donated more than $200. This outpouring of support is a testament to the deep connection the community has with the museum and its mission. As Magna looks to the future, the museum will undoubtedly play a vital role in helping new residents learn about and integrate into the community, especially as Magna's population continues to grow. The museum offers something for everyone, and I encourage all of our listeners to visit, donate, and support this incredible institution. Whether you're a history buff, a community supporter, or simply curious about the rich heritage of Magna and Utah, the museum is well worth your time and your support. Once again, we extend our heartfelt thanks to Kevin Hardman, Zach Hewett, and Jon Clark for joining us today and sharing their knowledge, stories, and passion. Their dedication to preserving the history and culture of Magna is truly inspiring, and we're grateful to have had this opportunity to learn from them. Please consider supporting Utah's Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna in any way you can, whether through donations, attending city meetings, or simply spreading the word. Together, Magna residents can help ensure that this wonderful museum continues to thrive and inspire future generations. One last time, I'd like to provide listeners with the contact information for the organization. You can visit them, and you should, at 9056 West Magna Main Street, Magna, Utah. You can phone them at 801-698-0226. You can find them on Facebook at Ethnic Mining Museum of Magna. And you can send them mail to P.O. Box 742, Magna, Utah 84044. Now, if questions occur to you and you'd like more information, please connect with the organization via the contact information provided. I really hope this information helps the audience understand how valuable the Utah Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna is to the community. The Utah Ethnic and Mining Museum of Magna is truly one of our preservation oaks. All right, that's a wrap for this episode. Music used today is from Cymbalbird, Carmen Maria, and Edu Espinal. Score Wizards, 777 Music, Heart Drum Machine, and Scott Holmes. Microstream Radio is a registered trademark. You can visit us at www.microstreamradio.com. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted by Microstream Radio. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere without the written permission of Microstream Radio. Thanks to everybody for listening. Stay curious and keep exploring the incredible stories that shape our world. This is Sean Radcliff. We'll see you all next time on Preservation Oaks, and until then, keep on giving and keep on living the good life.